A desperate single father paid $800 for a house buried under Montana snow that no one else wanted, thinking he'd found shelter for his freezing children. But when he finally broke through a concealed steel door hidden behind crumbling drywall, what he discovered in that sealed room would either save his family or destroy everything he'd fought to protect. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The hospital bills came first, then the funeral expenses, then the eviction notice. Marcus Reed sat in his car outside the apartment he could no longer afford, staring at 3 pieces of paper that together spelled the end of everything he'd built. His hands shook as he read them again, though he'd memorized every word days ago. In the back seat, his daughter Emma pressed her face against the window, watching other children play in the apartment complex courtyard. She was 8 years old and understood more than Marcus wished she did. Beside her, 5-year-old Tyler clutched a stuffed bear with one missing eye and asked for the 3rd time when they were going inside. "Soon, buddy," Marcus lied. They couldn't go inside. The locks had been changed that morning. 6 months ago, Marcus had been a different man. He'd worked construction, made decent money, lived in a modest 2-bedroom with his wife Sarah and their 2 kids, nothing fancy but stable, safe. Then Sarah started getting headaches, terrible ones that made her vomit and see spots. The doctors ran tests, found the tumor. Inoperable, they said, maybe 6 months with treatment. She got 4. Marcus spent those 4 months watching the woman he loved disappear piece by piece. He held her hand through chemotherapy sessions. He learned to braid Emma's hair when Sarah was too weak. He sang Tyler to sleep when nightmares woke him. He went to work when he could and called in sick when he couldn't bear to leave Sarah's side. His boss was understanding at first. Then understanding became frustration. Then frustration became a pink slip. The insurance covered some of the medical costs, not nearly enough. Marcus burned through their savings in 6 weeks. He sold everything that wasn't essential: his tools, Sarah's jewelry, the television, his truck. He borrowed from friends until they stopped answering his calls. He took jobs under the table, day labor, moving furniture, anything that paid cash. It wasn't enough. Sarah died on a Tuesday morning in October, holding Marcus's hand, whispering that she was sorry, that she loved him, that she wished she could stay. Emma and Tyler were at school. Marcus was grateful they didn't have to see their mother's last breath, but he'd carry the weight of being the only witness for the rest of his life. The funeral cost $3,000. Marcus had $800. The funeral director, a kind man named Phillips, told him to pay what he could now and the rest later. Marcus knew later would never come. He was 2 months behind on rent. The landlord had already started eviction proceedings. His phone had been shut off for non-payment. His credit cards were maxed out. He was 34 years old, and his life had been reduced to a dying Ford pickup, 3 garbage bags of clothes, and $800 in cash that should have gone to bury his wife properly. On the day of the eviction, Marcus loaded everything they owned into the truck bed: clothes, a few toys, Emma's homework binder, Tyler's bear, a photo album Sarah had made years ago. It all fit easily. That was the worst part, how little remained of their entire life together. "Where are we going?" Emma asked as Marcus started the engine. "I don't know yet, sweetheart, but somewhere safe." He drove west because west felt like new beginnings, like starting over. He had no plan, no destination, just a vague hope that cheaper living existed somewhere beyond the city limits. They slept in the truck the first night, parked behind a gas station, Emma and Tyler curled together in the back seat under every jacket they owned. Marcus sat in the driver's seat, watching his children sleep, and felt like he'd failed at every single thing that mattered. The second day, Emma asked if they were homeless now. Marcus wanted to say no, wanted to lie and protect her from that word, but Emma had her mother's eyes, dark and perceptive, and she'd know he was lying. "We're between homes," he said carefully. "Just for a little while." Owen at school said his uncle was between homes. He lived in his car for a year. That's not going to happen to us. How do you know? Marcus didn't answer because he didn't know. He didn't know anything anymore except that his children deserved better than this. They drove through Idaho, eating fast food they couldn't afford, rationing gas, sleeping in rest stop parking lots. Marcus applied for jobs at every town they passed: construction, retail, kitchen work, anything. Most places wanted applications online. Some wanted references. All of them wanted an address, a phone number, proof of stability Marcus couldn't provide. On the fourth day, in a library in eastern Montana where Marcus had stopped so the kids could use a bathroom and he could access a computer, he saw it. A flyer pinned to a community bulletin board, half hidden behind advertisements for used furniture and guitar lessons. Foreclosure auction. Stone house, 12 acres, Coldwater, Montana. Winterized, needs work. Starting bid, $800, cash only, must view to bid. Contact Coldwater County Clerk. Marcus stared at the flyer for a full minute. $800. That was exactly what he had left. Not $850, not $795. Exactly $800. It felt like a sign, or a trap. He couldn't decide which. He pulled out his phone, still working on the last dregs of a prepaid card, and called the number listed. A woman answered on the third ring, her voice flat and tired. Coldwater County Clerk's office. Hi, I'm calling about the foreclosure auction, the house for $800. A pause. You serious? Yes, ma'am. When can you get here? Where's Coldwater? 4 hours north, middle of nowhere. House is real, if that's what you're asking. It's been sitting empty 6 years. We just want it off the books. What's wrong with it? Another pause. Nothing's wrong with it, structurally. It's just, Coldwater's not a place people move to. It's a place people leave. I need a place for my kids. Is it livable? Winterized, like the flyer says. Roof's solid. Previous owner maintained it well before he died. You got $800 cash? Yes. Then get up here before someone else does. Though honestly, you're the first call we've gotten in 3 months. Marcus hung up and looked at his children. Emma was reading a picture book to Tyler in the children's section, both of them sitting cross-legged on the carpet. They looked exhausted. Tyler's face was still puffy from crying himself to sleep the night before. Emma's coat had a tear in the sleeve Marcus kept meaning to fix. 4 hours north, middle of nowhere. $800 between them and homelessness. It wasn't a choice. It was the only option left. They arrived in Coldwater as the sun was setting and the temperature was dropping. Marcus had seen dying towns before, but Coldwater was beyond dying. It was already a ghost, just waiting for someone to close its eyes. Main Street consisted of boarded-up storefronts, a post office that looked abandoned, and a gas station with rusted pumps. No traffic lights, no pedestrians, just wind whistling through empty buildings and snow beginning to fall. The county building was a small brick structure on the edge of what might have once been downtown. Inside, a woman with iron-gray hair and a face carved by hard years looked up from a desk piled with folders. You the one who called about the Reed property? Blackwood property, she corrected. Roland Blackwood. You Marcus Reed? Yes, ma'am. She studied him. The worn jacket, the hollow eyes, the way he stood like a man expecting another blow. Then her gaze shifted to Emma and Tyler, who clung to their father's legs, and something in her expression softened. You got kids staying in that house? Yes, ma'am, if I can buy it. You got the $800? Marcus pulled out the envelope. His hands shook slightly as he counted the bills on her desk, 28 20s and 4 50s. Everything he had. Literally everything. She counted it slowly, then pushed a clipboard toward him. Sign here, here, and here. House and 12 acres are yours, along with all contents and structures. Properties being sold as is for unpaid taxes. Previous owner died intestate 6 years ago. No heirs came forward. It's clean. You're not inheriting anybody's mess except the property itself." Marcus signed. His signature looked shaky, desperate. It matched how he felt. The woman pulled a small metal lockbox from her desk drawer and set it on the counter. "Keys are inside. Combination is 1959. That's the year the house was built." She unfolded a hand-drawn map. "Follow Timber Road north about 8 miles. Can't miss it. Only structure out there." "Is there electricity?" "Should be. Roland kept everything maintained. He was particular about that." "What was he like? The previous owner?" Her expression became unreadable. "Private. Very private. Moved here about 30 years ago from back east. Kept to himself. Some folks thought he was strange, but he never caused trouble. Paid his taxes until he couldn't anymore." "How did he die?" "Heart attack, they figure. Alone in that house. Took a week before anyone noticed he hadn't been to town." She paused, seemed to consider saying more, then didn't. "It's a solid house. You got a good deal. It's isolated out there. Nearest neighbor is 4 miles. No cell service. Landline in the house might still work if the phone company hasn't cut it." "We'll manage." She looked at him with something that might have been pity or respect. He couldn't tell which. "I hope so. Good luck, Mr. Reed." Marcus carried Tyler, the boy had fallen asleep in the office, and Emma held his hand as they walked back to the truck. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees. Snow was falling steadily now, fat flakes that stuck to everything. "Daddy, I'm scared," Emma whispered. "Me too, sweetheart, but we've got a house now. A real house. That's something." The drive to the property was treacherous. Timber Road was barely a road at all, more like 2 ruts through dense forest. Snow was accumulating fast, and the truck's worn tires slipped on the icy surface. Marcus drove slowly, knuckles white on the steering wheel, praying they wouldn't get stuck. 8 miles felt like 80. Then, through the swirling snow and gathering darkness, the house appeared. It rose from the white landscape like something out of a Gothic novel. 2 stories of dark gray stone with tall, narrow windows and a steep roof designed to shed snow. No lights, no smoke from the chimney, just cold stone and darker shadows. It looked haunted. Emma pressed her face to the window. "That's it?" "That's home," Marcus said, trying to inject confidence he didn't feel. He parked as close as he could, but snow had already drifted 3 feet deep against the front door. Marcus waded through it, Tyler heavy in his arms, Emma struggling behind him. The cold bit through their inadequate clothing. Tyler woke up crying. Emma's teeth chattered. The lockbox hung from the door handle, crusted with ice. Marcus's numb fingers fumbled with the combination. 1959, 1959. The box opened. Inside were 2 heavy brass keys and a folded piece of paper. Marcus pocketed the keys and opened the paper. Handwritten in neat cursive. "To whoever finds this house, I hope you need it more than I did. Take care of her. She's solid. R.B." Something about those words made Marcus's throat tight. He unlocked the door. The key turned smoothly, as if recently oiled, and pushed it open. Darkness and cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of stone and dust and something else Marcus couldn't identify. Abandonment, maybe, or loneliness. He found a light switch just inside the door and flipped it, not expecting anything. To his shock, lights flickered on throughout the front room. The house had power. The first thing Marcus saw was the fireplace, a massive stone structure dominating one wall, with logs stacked neatly beside it as if someone had just stepped away. Furniture sat throughout the room, covered in white sheets like sleeping ghosts. The floors were hardwood, thick with dust but undamaged. The ceilings were high with exposed beams. It was beautiful and freezing. "Tyler, Emma, stay here," Marcus said, setting his son down. He grabbed the driest logs from the stack and crumpled some papers from a box beside the hearth. His hands shook from cold as he struck a match. His last match, he realized with a spike of panic. It caught. The paper ignited. The kindling caught. Within minutes, flames were climbing the logs, pushing back the darkness, sending warmth into the frozen room. Tyler stopped crying. Emma moved closer to the fire, holding out her small hands. "It's warm," she whispered, as if warmth was something she'd forgotten existed. Marcus wanted to explore, but the children needed food and beds first. He found the kitchen, surprisingly modern, with a gas stove and a hand pump at the sink. He pumped the handle. After several hard strokes, rusty water sputtered out, then cleared. The pump was connected to a well, still functioning. In the cabinets, he found dishes, pots, pans, even some canned goods left behind: beans, soup, vegetables. The expiration dates had passed years ago, but beggars couldn't be choosers. He heated soup on the gas stove. The propane tank must still have gas, and served it in chipped bowls he'd found. Emma and Tyler ate quietly, ravenously. They were too tired to talk, too overwhelmed to complain. After dinner, Marcus explored upstairs. 4 bedrooms, all furnished with sheet-covered beds. He pulled back the covers in the smallest room. A twin bed with a faded quilt, a dresser, a nightstand. It looked like a child's room, though it clearly hadn't been used in years. He made up beds for Emma and Tyler in adjoining rooms, using their sleeping bags as extra blankets. They fell asleep within minutes, exhausted by fear and cold and the relief of finally being somewhere that wasn't moving. Marcus stood in the doorway between their rooms, watching them sleep. Emma's face was peaceful for the first time in weeks. Tyler clutched his one-eyed bear. They looked safe. Marcus returned downstairs and really looked at the house for the first time. The front room was large, maybe 20 by 30 feet. The fireplace was professional work. Someone had known what they were doing. The furniture, once he pulled off the sheets, was quality. A leather couch, 2 armchairs, a coffee table made of thick oak. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with books on art, history, and European travel. He found the circuit breaker in a utility closet and was shocked to discover the house had been wired for modern electricity. The water heater was propane-powered and still working. In the basement he found a generator, also propane-powered, and several large tanks, enough fuel to last months. Roland Blackwood had left the house ready to live in, almost as if he'd expected someone might need it someday. That first night, Marcus slept on the couch by the fire, one ear always listening for his children. The house creaked and settled around him. Wind howled outside, rattling windows. Snow piled higher against the glass, but they were inside. They were warm. They had food for a few days and a roof that didn't leak. It wasn't much, but it was more than they'd had that morning. Marcus woke before dawn to the sound of Tyler crying. He ran upstairs to find his son sitting up in bed, confused about where he was. "Shh, buddy, it's okay. We're in our new house, remember?" "I want Mommy!" Marcus's chest ached. He climbed into the small bed and held his son. "I know. I want her too, but we've got each other, okay? You, me, and Emma. We're going to be okay. Promise?" Marcus thought about the $800 he'd just spent, leaving them with nothing. He thought about the snow falling outside and the empty refrigerator and the fact that he had no job, no prospects, and 2 children depending on him. "I promise," he said anyway. Because what else could he say? By the time the sun rose, gray and weak through the snow, Marcus had a plan. First priority, food. They had maybe 3 days' worth of canned goods and pasta. After that, they'd need supplies. Second priority, work. He'd find something, anything. Third priority, make this house livable for the long term. He left Emma in charge, she was 8 going on 30 with her mother's competence, and walked to Coldwater. 8 miles through knee-deep snow, the wind cutting through his inadequate coat. The walk took 3 hours. Coldwater looked even more depressing in daylight. Most buildings were abandoned. The few that weren't seemed to exist out of stubbornness rather than viability. Marcus found the general store, a sagging building with a faded sign reading Raymond's Goods. A bell jangled as he entered. An old man looked up from behind the counter, his expression shifting from bored to surprised. "Help you?" "I need supplies. Food, mostly. Some basics." Marcus pulled out the $17 he'd found in his coat pocket, money he'd forgotten about. "I can pay this now. I'll need to set up an account for the rest. I'm good for it. I just need—" "You're the one who bought the Blackwood place." Word traveled fast. Marcus nodded. "You got kids with you?" 2.8 and 5. The old man's weathered face softened slightly. "What's your plan?" "Find work. Get us through the winter. Take it one day at a time." "No work here. Town's been dying for 20 years. Most folks who can leave have left." Marcus's hope deflated. "There must be something. I can do construction, carpentry, electrical work, plumbing. I'm a hard worker. I just need a chance." The old man, Raymond, according to the name tag, studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed and pushed the $17 back across the counter. "Keep your money. Load up a basket with what you need. Pay me when you can." Marcus stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because 30 years ago I was you, standing in someone's store desperate with kids at home and nothing in my pocket. Someone helped me then. Figure I can help you now." He paused. "Also, anybody who'd move into that house with children must be desperate enough to deserve a break." "What's wrong with the house?" "Nothing's wrong with it. Roland kept it in perfect shape. It's just that man lived out there alone for 30 years. Barely talked to anybody. Folks wondered what he was hiding." "Hiding from what?" Raymond shrugged. "Who knows? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Roland was private, real private. When he died, county sealed the house before anybody could really look inside. You're the first person who's been in there in 6 years." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Did you know him? Roland?" "Not well. He'd come to town once a month for supplies. Always paid cash, never stayed long. Polite enough, but you could tell he didn't want company." Raymond pulled out a pad of paper. "Look, there's a church pantry that might be able to help you. Reverend Michaels runs it. Good man. Tell him Raymond sent you." Marcus spent an hour gathering supplies: flour, sugar, rice, canned goods, pasta, oatmeal, powdered milk. Raymond kept adding items Marcus hadn't selected: extra blankets, batteries, candles, matches. "Winter up here is brutal," Raymond said. "You're going to need this stuff." As Marcus prepared to leave, Raymond stopped him. "One more thing. If you need work, talk to Tom Ridley. He's the sheriff, but he also does odd jobs around town. Might be able to point you towards something." Marcus walked back to the house, supplies heavy in a backpack Raymond had given him. The return trip was harder. Uphill, loaded down, exhausted. But when he walked through the door and saw Emma and Tyler's faces light up at the sight of food, every painful step was worth it. That night they had a real meal: spaghetti with canned sauce, bread with butter, canned peaches for dessert. It felt like a feast. But as Marcus washed dishes at the kitchen sink, pumping water by hand, he looked around the house and felt the weight of it. This place was keeping them alive, but it was also strange. The architecture was odd in ways he couldn't quite articulate. Some walls sounded hollow when he knocked on them. Certain closets seemed shallower than they should be. And in the study, a room lined floor to ceiling with bookshelves, one section looked slightly different from the others. He'd noticed it that first night but had been too exhausted to investigate. Now, with the children asleep and the house creaking around him, his curiosity pulled him to that study. Marcus ran his hands over the mismatched bookshelf, feeling for seams, catches, anything unusual. The wood grain was similar to the other shelves, but not identical. The spacing was slightly off, and when he knocked on it, the sound was hollow. There was something behind this wall. Marcus pulled books off the shelf, examining the back panel. Nothing obvious. He checked the sides, the top, the bottom. Nothing. He was about to give up when his fingers found it. A small button recessed into the underside of one of the middle shelves, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. His heart began to pound. He pressed the button. A soft click echoed through the room. Then, slowly, silently, a section of the bookshelf swung inward, revealing darkness beyond and stone steps leading down. Marcus grabbed a flashlight and aimed the beam into the opening. Cold, dry air wafted up, sterile and preserved. The steps descended at least 20 feet. At the bottom, barely visible in the flashlight beam, was a door. Not wood, steel, with a heavy-duty combination lock. Marcus stood at the top of those steps, every instinct screaming at him to close the shelf and forget what he'd found. Normal people didn't have secret passages in their homes. Normal people didn't install steel doors with combination locks in hidden basements. Roland Blackwood had been hiding something important enough to conceal behind false walls and locked doors. Something that had kept him isolated and suspicious for 30 years. And now, whatever it was belonged to Marcus. He descended 3 steps, then stopped. What if it was dangerous? What if opening that door brought trouble Marcus couldn't handle? He had children upstairs, children depending on him. He couldn't risk their safety chasing mysteries in a dead man's house. Marcus climbed back up and closed the bookshelf. He replaced the books exactly as they'd been. Then he went upstairs, checked on Emma and Tyler, both sleeping peacefully, and returned to the couch by the fireplace, but he couldn't sleep. His mind kept returning to those stone steps, that steel door, the question of what someone would guard so carefully. Money, weapons, something illegal, or something valuable beyond measure. Marcus lay awake until dawn, watching shadows dance on the ceiling, wondering if he'd just found salvation or damnation hidden beneath his $800 house, and wondering which one he could afford to walk away from. The first week in the house passed in a blur of survival routines. Marcus woke before dawn each day to stoke the fire, pump water, and prepare breakfast from their dwindling supplies. Emma helped without being asked, taking care of Tyler while Marcus worked on making the house more livable. She was too young for such responsibility, but grief and necessity had aged her beyond her 8 years. Tyler was different. He cried more now, asked for his mother constantly, and woke screaming from nightmares Marcus couldn't soothe away. Some mornings Marcus would find his son standing at the window, small hands pressed against the cold glass, staring out at the endless white landscape with an expression far too sad for a 5-year-old face. "What are you looking at, buddy?" Marcus asked one morning, kneeling beside him. "I'm waiting for Mommy to come find us," Tyler whispered. "She doesn't know where we are." Marcus pulled his son close, blinking back tears. "Mommy knows, Tyler. She's watching over us from heaven. She knows we're safe now." "Are we safe?" Marcus looked around the stone house, solid walls, working heat, a roof that held back the snow. By any measure, they were safer than they'd been in weeks. But safety meant more than shelter. It meant food in the pantry and money for emergencies and a future that didn't feel like standing on the edge of a cliff. "Yeah," Marcus said, hoping it was true. "We're safe." But the food situation was becoming critical. By the end of that first week, they were down to rice, a few cans of beans, and half a bag of flour. Marcus had walked to Coldwater twice more, picking up supplies on credit from Raymond and odd jobs from Sheriff Tom Ridley, shoveling sidewalks, splitting firewood, fixing a broken fence. The work paid in cash, $20 here, $30 there, barely enough to cover their immediate needs. On the 8th day, Marcus sat at the kitchen table after the children had gone to bed, counting his money, $63 and some change. He had a list of repairs the house needed, a longer list of supplies they couldn't afford, and a crushing awareness that this wasn't sustainable. They needed more. He needed to find real work or some other solution. His thoughts kept drifting to the hidden door in the basement. He'd tried to forget about it, tried to focus on immediate problems, but the mystery pulled at him like a splinter he couldn't ignore. What had Roland Blackwood hidden down there? Why had a man who lived modestly spent time and money building a concealed vault? Marcus knew he should leave it alone. Opening that door might bring trouble. But what if it didn't? What if whatever was down there could help them? He waited until midnight, when he was certain the children were deeply asleep. Then he descended to the study, pressed the hidden button, and watched the bookshelf swing open. The stone steps looked even more ominous in the darkness. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and a notebook he'd found in Roland's desk, then descended. The steel door waited at the bottom, imposing and mysterious. The combination lock was commercial grade, 5 digits, sturdy construction. Marcus examined it carefully, looking for any clues Roland might have left. Nothing. He tried obvious combinations first. 00000. Nothing. 1 2 3 4 5. Nothing. He tried the year the house was built, 1959. The lock didn't budge. Marcus sat on the stone steps and thought. People chose combinations that meant something to them. Birthdays, anniversaries, significant dates. But he knew nothing about Roland Blackwood except that the man had been private and careful. He climbed back upstairs and began searching the house more methodically. He'd done cursory searches before, looking for anything valuable or useful, but now he hunted for information about Roland himself. In the desk drawers he found old bills, blank notebooks, and supplies. Nothing personal. In the master bedroom closet, hidden under a stack of folded sweaters, Marcus found a small metal box. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside were documents: Roland's birth certificate, a military discharge paper, an expired passport, and several photographs. Marcus studied each item carefully by lamplight. The birth certificate showed Roland Blackwood had been born on September 15, 1941 in Chicago, Illinois. The military discharge paper indicated he'd served in Vietnam from 1967 to 1969. The passport, expired since 2012, was filled with stamps from European countries: France, Switzerland, Italy, Belgium, Austria. But it was the photographs that caught Marcus's attention. Most showed Roland as a younger man, always alone, standing in front of museums or art galleries. In one photo, he stood beside a painting hanging in what looked like a restoration studio. On the back, someone, presumably Roland, had written, "Geneva, November 3rd, 1986. Finally." Marcus stared at that date. November 3rd, 1986. The word finally suggested something important had happened that day. An acquisition, a discovery. Whatever it was, it had mattered enough to photograph and note. He returned to the basement and tried the combination, 110386. November 3rd, 1986. The lock clicked open. Marcus froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. His hands trembled as he gripped the heavy steel handle and pulled. The door swung inward with surprising smoothness. The hinges had been recently oiled, well-maintained despite years of disuse. The smell hit him immediately. Cool, controlled air with a chemical undertone he recognized from museums. Climate control, preservation materials. This wasn't just a basement storage room. This was a vault. Marcus shined his flashlight inside, and what the beam revealed made his breath catch in his throat. Paintings. Dozens of them. Maybe more. They lined the walls in professional storage racks, each one carefully wrapped in protective material and labeled with meticulous handwriting. The vault was larger than he'd expected, at least 20 feet square, with reinforced concrete walls, recessed lighting, and what looked like a dehumidification system still humming quietly. Marcus stepped inside on shaking legs. His flashlight beam swept across the space, revealing more with each pass. A desk sat in the center of the room, covered with leather-bound ledgers and file boxes organized with military precision. Along the back wall stood climate-controlled cases with glass fronts. Inside those cases, Marcus could see stacks of something that looked like currency, bonds, and small boxes he couldn't identify from this distance. He moved to the nearest painting rack and carefully, reverently pulled back the protective wrapping on the first piece. Even in flashlight illumination, the quality was obvious. The painting showed a young woman reading by candlelight, the brushwork exquisite, the colors still vibrant despite obvious age. A small card attached to the frame read, "Candlelight Reader, circa 1650, attributed to Gerrit Dou, acquired Geneva 1986. Marcus's hands shook as he rewrapped it. That date, 1986, the same year from Roland's photograph. He moved to the next painting. This one showed a Dutch harbor scene, boats and merchants rendered in stunning detail. The card read, "Harbor at Dusk, circa 1690, School of Willem van de Velde the Younger, acquired Amsterdam 1988. He unwrapped 5 more paintings, each one clearly old, clearly valuable, each one meticulously documented with attribution, acquisition date, and origin. His mind raced, trying to calculate what he was seeing, but he had no reference point. He knew nothing about art beyond recognizing quality when he saw it. Marcus turned to the desk, his legs weak. He pulled out the chair and sat heavily, then opened the top ledger with trembling fingers. The first page was dated January 15th, 1987, written in the same neat handwriting from the painting labels. Collection Inventory, Roland Blackwood. Initiated this date for purposes of authentication and preservation. This collection represents 30 years of careful acquisition, authentication, and protection. Each piece documented herein has been obtained through legal channels and authenticated by recognized experts. This record serves as provenance and testament to the care taken in assembling and maintaining these works. Marcus flipped through the pages. Each entry was meticulous. Item description, acquisition date and location, purchase price, authentication notes, condition reports, and estimated current value. The values made his head spin. $50,000 for one piece, $120,000 for another, $300,000 for a third. He turned pages faster now, his breath coming quick and shallow. Paintings, drawings, small sculptures, rare books. Item after item, value after value, the numbers climbing higher. Some pieces Roland had owned for decades. Others were more recent acquisitions. But every single one was documented with the kind of care that suggested this wasn't just a collection, it was a life's work. Marcus reached the final pages where Roland had apparently made his last entries, dated just weeks before his death. At the bottom of the last page of inventory, written in a slightly shakier hand, was a summary. Total collection count: 68 paintings, 23 drawings, 12 sculptures, 7 rare manuscripts. Conservative total value estimate as of this date, approximately $187 million. Additional assets, see Appendix B. $58 million in authenticated currency, bonds, and precious metals. Grand total, $245 million. The numbers sat there on the page, impossible and real. Marcus read them 3 times, 4 times. They didn't change. $245 million. He closed the ledger carefully, opened it again, checked the math. The number was the same. His hands were shaking so badly now that he had to press them flat against the desk to steady them. $245 million. In a vault beneath a house he'd bought for $800. Marcus stood abruptly, stumbled, caught himself against the wall. His flashlight beam swept wildly across the vault, illuminating treasure upon treasure. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen. Not to construction workers who'd lost everything, not to desperate fathers with $63 in their pocket and 2 children sleeping upstairs who didn't know if they'd eat tomorrow. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to think clearly. He opened another ledger, this one containing correspondence. Letters between Roland and various auction houses, galleries, museums, and private collectors. Most were routine: purchase confirmations, authentication requests, condition reports. But one letter caught his attention. It was dated May 7, 2013, from a law office in Geneva, Switzerland.
Dear Mr. Blackwood,
regarding your inquiry into the legal status of items acquired during the period 1945 to 1955, after extensive research through both Swiss and international archives, I can confirm that the pieces in question remain legally unclaimed under current statute. The original owners perished during the war years, and exhaustive searches have revealed no surviving heirs or legal claimants. Under the International Convention on Cultural Property, items acquired in good faith through legitimate commercial channels after a period of 50 years may be considered legally possessed by the current holder, provided there is no evidence of theft or direct looting. However, I must strongly advise continued discretion regarding this collection. Public disclosure would inevitably invite scrutiny from various governments, institutions, and advocacy groups. While your legal position is sound, the court of public opinion can be unpredictable, particularly concerning items with wartime provenance. The moral and ethical questions surrounding such pieces are complex and beyond my expertise as an attorney. I can only confirm the legal position. Marcus read the letter twice more, his stomach tightening. Wartime provenance. Items from 1945 to 1955. Original owners who perished during the war. The Holocaust. Some of these pieces had likely belonged to Jewish families in Europe. Families destroyed by the Nazis. Their possessions scattered and lost to history. Roland had acquired them legally, yes, but the weight of that history pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. He opened more files, piecing together the story. Roland had been an art authenticator and dealer, specializing in estate acquisitions. After the war, countless pieces of art had entered the gray market, not directly stolen or looted, but inherited, sold, and resold through generations, their original ownership forgotten or deliberately obscured. Roland had focused on these pieces, buying them legally through established channels, but always haunted by the knowledge of where they'd likely come from. The correspondence files showed a man increasingly troubled by his life's work. In a letter dated 2017, Roland wrote to his attorney, "I am 76 years old and facing the reality that my time grows short. This collection has been my life's obsession, but I recognize it cannot remain hidden forever. I have no heirs, no family to inherit this burden. Therefore, I have decided that upon my death, the collection must be dispersed according to a plan that honors the people who once owned these pieces. I am working to identify pieces with clear wartime provenance. Those will be returned to their countries of origin through proper diplomatic channels, with the request that they be displayed publicly with acknowledgement of their history. Other pieces with documented provenance will be donated anonymously to appropriate museums. The remaining items, those purchased with clean documentation and no wartime connection, will be sold, with proceeds establishing a foundation for art preservation and Holocaust education. I want something good to come from this collection, something that acknowledges the evil that made it possible while celebrating the beauty that survived." But attached to that letter was a handwritten note dated just 3 months before Roland's death. "Plan incomplete. Heart problems worsening. Doctor says months at most. Must finish documentation. Must leave instructions. Time running out." He hadn't finished. Death had come too quickly. Marcus sat in the silent vault, surrounded by $245 million worth of art and history and moral complexity, and felt the crushing weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. This wasn't just a fortune. It was a burden, a decision, a test. What would he do with this? What should he do with it? He thought about Emma and Tyler sleeping upstairs, about the $63 that was all they had between them and starvation, about the desperate weeks of sleeping in the truck and applying for jobs that never came through. This fortune could solve every problem they'd ever face. College funds, security, comfort, opportunity, everything he'd ever wanted to give his children but couldn't. But he also thought about the families who'd once owned these paintings. Jewish families who'd hung these beautiful things in their homes, who'd looked at them daily, who'd lost everything, their art, their lives, their futures. How could he profit from that tragedy? How could he sleep knowing he'd gotten rich from suffering he couldn't imagine? Marcus opened a third ledger and found something that made his chest tighten. Lists of pieces Roland had researched but couldn't trace. 17 paintings, each marked with a red asterisk and notes spanning years of searching. Cannot locate heirs, family line extinct after Treblinka. Surviving relatives traced to Australia but deceased before contact made. Original owners died in Auschwitz. No descendants found after 10 years of research. Roland had tried. He'd spent tens of thousands of dollars hiring researchers, contacting museums, working with Holocaust survivor groups. But for 17 pieces, he'd found no one to return them to. The families were gone completely, erased from history along with their possessions. Marcus closed the ledger and looked around the vault one more time. This was beyond him, beyond anything he knew how to handle. He was a construction worker, not an art expert or a lawyer or an ethicist. He couldn't make these decisions alone. He climbed back upstairs, closed the bookshelf entrance, and stood in the dark study, heart pounding. The house creaked around him, wind howling outside. Somewhere upstairs, Tyler cried out in his sleep, a small, frightened sound that cut through the darkness. Marcus went to his son, gathered him close, whispered comfort until the boy settled back into sleep. Then he checked on Emma, adjusting her blankets, watching her peaceful face in the dim moonlight filtering through the window. They needed this money. They deserved security after everything they'd lost. But did they deserve it at the cost of profiting from genocide? From tragedy? Marcus returned downstairs and made coffee, his hands still shaking. Dawn was hours away, but he knew he wouldn't sleep. His mind churned with questions that had no easy answers, possibilities that terrified and tempted him in equal measure. He pulled out the notebook he'd carried to the vault and began writing down everything he could remember. The inventory count, the estimated values, Roland's plans for dispersal, the pieces with red asterisks. He worked until his hand cramped, documenting everything because he knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't keep this secret much longer. But before he told anyone, before he made any decisions, he needed to understand exactly what he had. He needed to know which pieces were legally his without question, which ones carried moral obligations, and which ones he'd need to return regardless of the financial cost. The next morning, Marcus told Emma and Tyler he needed to do some work in the basement and asked them to play upstairs quietly. Emma gave him a curious look. She was too observant, too smart, but nodded and took Tyler to build a fort in one of the bedrooms. Marcus spent 6 hours in the vault that day, reading every document, examining every painting, cross-referencing Roland's notes with information he could find on his phone when the signal cooperated. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd been scrupulously careful. Roland hadn't dealt in anything directly stolen or looted. He'd specialized in estate acquisitions, pieces that came to market through legal channels, decades after the war, items that had passed through multiple hands. It was legal. The Geneva lawyer had confirmed that. But legal and right weren't always the same thing. By mid-afternoon, Marcus had created his own inventory divided into 3 categories. 41 pieces with completely clean provenance, purchased from documented estates with no wartime connections. These were legally and morally his without question. Total value approximately $90 million, 27 pieces acquired legally but with uncertain pre-market history. Likely wartime displacement, but no specific families identified. Legal gray zone, moral gray zone. Total value, approximately $97 million. 17 pieces with clear wartime provenance, but no living heirs found despite extensive searching. Legal to keep, but morally complicated. Total value, approximately $58 million. Plus the currency, bonds, and precious metals in the cases along the back wall. Roland had been very clear about these in his notes. All currency and bonds acquired legally through estate sales and specialized dealers. Authenticated and documented. No wartime connection. Clear ownership. Total value, approximately $58 million. Marcus sat at Roland's desk and stared at his 3 lists. Even the first category alone, the completely clean pieces, was worth $90 million. Enough to solve every financial problem he'd ever have. Enough to give Emma and Tyler every advantage, every opportunity, every security. But taking any of it felt like crossing a line he couldn't uncross. Once he claimed ownership, once he started selling pieces or accessing that wealth, he became responsible for all of it, not just legally, but morally. What happens next will turn this quiet winter upside down, reveal truths that powerful people want buried, and remind us that sometimes the heaviest treasures aren't made of gold, they're made of choice. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Marcus climbed out of the vault as the sun was setting, his mind made up about one thing at least. He couldn't do this alone. He needed help from someone who understood art, understood law, understood the moral weight of what he'd found. Someone he could trust with a secret that could destroy him if it fell into the wrong hands. That evening, after the children were asleep, Marcus walked to the only payphone in Coldwater, outside the closed post office, and called the number on the business card Raymond had given him weeks ago. Reverend Michaels answered on the 3rd ring. "Reverend? This is Marcus Reed. Raymond told me you might be able to help with something complicated." "How complicated?" Marcus looked up at the stars, cold and distant, and made a decision that would change everything. "I found something in my house, something valuable, something that belonged to people who aren't alive anymore to claim it. And I don't know what to do." A long pause. Then, "How valuable?" Marcus closed his eyes. "Very." "I see." Another pause. "Can you come to the church tomorrow? We should talk in person." "Tomorrow. Yes. Thank you, Reverend." Marcus hung up and walked home through the snow, each step feeling like a commitment to a path he couldn't see but had to follow anyway. Behind him, the small town of Coldwater sat dark and quiet, unaware that the stranger who'd bought the Blackwood place for $800 was sitting on a fortune that would shake their world, and his, to its foundations. The house rose before him in the moonlight, stone and shadow, keeping its secrets for one more night. Marcus knew that after tomorrow, after he spoke to Reverend Michaels, everything would change. The quiet winter isolation would end, the secret would begin to spread, and the life he'd hoped to build for his children in this forgotten town would become something else entirely, something more complicated, more dangerous, and more important than simple survival. He just hoped that when the dust settled, when all the decisions were made and all the consequences played out, Emma and Tyler would still be safe. That he'd have protected them not just with money, but with integrity. That the fortune hidden beneath their feet would become a blessing rather than a curse. Marcus locked the door behind him, checked on his sleeping children one more time, and stood in the dark house listening to it creak and settle. Somewhere beneath his feet, $245 million sat waiting, treasure and burden, salvation and trial, the answer to every prayer and the source of every problem he was about to face. And tomorrow, it would all begin. Reverend Michaels lived in a modest house beside the small church on the edge of Coldwater. When Marcus arrived the next morning, having walked the 8 miles through fresh snow while Emma watched Tyler, the elderly minister was already waiting on the porch, coffee steaming in his hands despite the bitter cold. "Mr. Reed," he said simply, gesturing inside. The house was warm and cluttered with books. Everywhere Marcus looked, shelves sagged under the weight of hardcovers: theology, history, philosophy, and surprisingly, art. Michaels noticed his gaze. "I wasn't always a small-town preacher," the Reverend said, settling into a worn armchair. "I spent 20 years as an art history professor at Columbia before I heard a different calling. I specialized in European works, particularly Dutch and Flemish masters from the 16th and 17th centuries. I also consulted for museums on provenance issues, authenticating ownership histories, tracking stolen works, helping institutions navigate restitution claims." Marcus felt the first flutter of hope. "Then you understand this world better than I'd like to sometimes. The art world can be beautiful and brutal in equal measure." Michaels set down his coffee. "Tell me what you found." Marcus spent 30 minutes explaining everything: the hidden vault, the meticulous documentation, the estimated values, Roland's apparent plans for restitution, the pieces with wartime provenance. Michaels listened without interrupting, his expression growing more grave with each revelation. When Marcus finished, the Reverend was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I need to see it. Tonight, if possible. I need to examine the collection and Roland's documentation before I can advise you properly. You believe me? Son, I've spent my life around collectors. What you're describing, the secrecy, the meticulous records, the moral struggle, that's exactly how serious collectors behave when they're sitting on something extraordinary and complicated." He paused. "Roland Blackwood. I never met him personally, but I remember hearing the name years ago. There were rumors in certain circles about a dealer who'd gone to ground, disappeared from the market completely. Some people thought he'd died, others thought he'd been caught with something stolen. Nobody knew for sure." "He wasn't a thief," Marcus said quickly. "His documentation shows he acquired everything legally through established channels." Legal and ethical aren't always the same thing, especially with wartime acquisitions. But if his documentation is as thorough as you say, that's a good sign. It means he cared about doing things properly. Michaels stood. "I'll come to your house tonight after dark. Best if we're not seen together too much just yet. And Marcus, don't tell anyone else about this. Not yet. Once word gets out, you'll have people coming at you from all directions, and not all of them will have good intentions." That night, after Emma and Tyler were asleep, Marcus led Reverend Michaels to the vault. He watched the older man's face as the steel door swung open and the climate-controlled space was revealed. Michaels drew a sharp breath, then stepped inside like a man entering a cathedral. For 3 hours, the Reverend examined pieces with the practiced eye of an expert. He studied paintings through a jeweler's loupe Marcus hadn't known existed in Roland's desk. He reviewed authentication certificates, cross-referenced acquisition dates with historical records on his phone, and read through Roland's correspondence files with increasing absorption. Finally, he sat at Roland's desk and rubbed his temples. "Dear God," he whispered, "this is extraordinary and terrifying. How much of it is real?" "All of it, as far as I can tell. Roland's authentication work is impeccable. These pieces are genuine, and they're worth at least what he estimated, possibly more. The art market has continued to climb." Michaels looked at Marcus with something like pity. "Do you understand what you're sitting on? A fortune. And a problem." "The problem is bigger than you realize." Michaels tapped the files containing red asterisks. "These 17 pieces with unclear provenance, they're going to be a lightning rod. Even though Roland acquired them legally, even though he searched for heirs, the moment this collection becomes public, you'll have advocacy groups, foreign governments, and opportunistic lawyers all claiming ownership. They'll tie you up in court for years." But the other pieces, the ones with clean documentation? Those are legally yours, no question. About $140 million worth by my rough calculation. He paused. But here's what you need to understand. Once you claim ownership of any part of this collection, you're claiming responsibility for all of it. You can't cherry-pick the clean pieces and walk away from the complicated ones. Legally, you might be able to, but morally, publicly, the court of public opinion will crucify you. Marcus felt his hope deflating. So what do I do? The right thing, which is also the hardest thing. Michaels pulled out a notebook. We need to document everything, contact the proper authorities, the FBI's art crime team, international agencies that handle restitution, and establish a clear public record of your intentions. We handle this transparently from the start, show that you're acting in good faith, and hope that protects you from the worst of what's coming.
What's coming?
Michaels met his eyes. When people find out about this, they'll come after you. Not just lawyers and government officials, but treasure hunters, criminals, opportunists of every stripe. Some will try to intimidate you, others will try to befriend you. All of them will want a piece of this collection. He softened. I won't lie to you, Marcus. The next few months are going to be hell. But if we do this right, if we're ethical and transparent, you'll come out the other side with your integrity intact and enough money to never worry again. And my children, will they be safe? I'll do everything in my power to ensure it, but you need to be prepared for attention you never wanted. They climbed back upstairs, and Michaels prepared to leave. At the door, he turned back. Tomorrow, I'm going to call a former colleague who works in the FBI's art crime team. Her name is Diana Torres, and she's one of the best in the business. Once I explain what we have, she'll want to come immediately. Are you ready for that? Marcus thought of Emma and Tyler sleeping upstairs, of the $63 that was still all they really had, of the burden sitting in the vault beneath their feet. No, he said honestly. But let's do it anyway. The next morning, Marcus was making breakfast when he heard vehicles approaching. Multiple vehicles. He went to the window and felt his stomach drop. 3 black SUVs were navigating the snowy driveway, moving with deliberate purpose. They parked in a semicircle in front of the house, and 6 men emerged, all wearing expensive coats and carrying briefcases. They looked like lawyers or businessmen, but something about their coordinated movements suggested military or security backgrounds. Emma appeared at Marcus's side. Daddy? Who are they? I don't know, sweetheart. Take Tyler upstairs and stay there until I come get you. Are they bad people? Marcus looked at his daughter's worried face and tried to smile. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Go on now. Once the children were upstairs, Marcus opened the door before the men could knock. The leader, a man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of posture that screamed authority, stepped forward with a cold smile. Marcus Reed? Who's asking?
My name is Lawrence Garrett. I'm an attorney representing a consortium of private collectors and cultural institutions. We need to speak with you about this property. I bought it legally through the county. There's nothing to discuss. Garrett's smile didn't waver. May we come in? It's rather cold out here, and our conversation concerns matters you'll want to hear about privately. Every instinct told Marcus to slam the door, but refusing would only make them more suspicious, and he needed to know what they knew. 5 minutes,
Marcus said, stepping aside. The men filed in, their eyes immediately scanning the room with practiced efficiency. They weren't just looking, they were cataloging, assessing, searching for something specific. Garrett settled into the armchair by the fireplace without being invited. Mr. Reed, I'll be direct. Roland Blackwood died in possession of certain items that legally belong to parties we represent. We have documentation proving ownership claims, and we have reason to believe those items remain on these premises.
What kind of items?
Artwork primarily.
Also certain financial instruments and collectibles, pieces worth considerable value that Mr. Blackwood acquired through questionable means. Marcus kept his expression neutral. I bought this house as is from the county. I found furniture, some books, kitchen supplies, nothing valuable. Have you explored the entire property? All rooms? Any basements or storage areas? It's an old house. I'm still learning the layout. One of the other men, younger, with cold eyes and a military bearing, spoke up. We have the original architectural plans from when this house was built. The interior dimensions don't match the exterior measurements. There's approximately 400 square feet of space unaccounted for. Marcus shrugged. Old houses are weird. Thick walls, odd angles. I wouldn't read too much into it. Garrett leaned forward. Mr. Reed, let me be perfectly clear. Roland Blackwood possessed items worth over $200 million when he died. Those items have never been recovered. You're living in his house. If you found anything unusual, anything at all, the smart move is to tell us now. We can handle this quietly and fairly. You'd be compensated generously for your cooperation. And if I haven't found anything? Then we have no issue. Garrett stood, pulling a business card from his pocket. But if you have found something and choose not to disclose it, that becomes a serious problem. Criminal concealment, possession of stolen property. You could lose this house, lose custody of your children, face federal charges. The threat was delivered smoothly, professionally, but it was unmistakably a threat. Marcus felt rage building in his chest but forced himself to stay calm. I think you should leave. Garrett studied him for a long moment, his eyes calculating. Think about what I said. We'll be in touch. He gestured to his men, who filed out behind him. At the door, Garrett paused. One more thing. Roland Blackwood was a paranoid man who trusted no one. If he did leave something valuable here, he wouldn't have made it easy to find. You might want to look more carefully at your new home's architecture. Sometimes walls aren't what they seem. After they left, Marcus stood shaking with adrenaline and fury. They knew. Maybe not exactly what was in the vault, but they knew Roland had hidden something valuable. And now they were watching, waiting for Marcus to slip up. He ran upstairs to check on the children. Emma and Tyler were building with blocks in one of the bedrooms, but Emma's face was pale. Are we in trouble? She asked quietly. Marcus knelt beside her. No, baby. Those men were just asking questions about the house. Nothing for you to worry about. But Emma wasn't fooled. She'd heard the threat in Garrett's voice, even from upstairs. She was 8 years old and had already learned that the world could be cruel. That afternoon, Marcus called Reverend Michaels from the payphone in town and explained what had happened. The Reverend's response was immediate and firm. Don't open that vault again until Agent Torres arrives. Don't touch anything in there. And Marcus, be very careful. Garrett has a reputation. He specializes in aggressive recovery of disputed assets, and he's not above intimidation or worse. He threatened my children. I know. That's why we need federal involvement immediately. I'm calling Torres now. 2 days later, Agent Diana Torres arrived in Coldwater driving an unmarked sedan. She was a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. She met with Marcus privately at Reverend Michaels' house, away from potential surveillance. Tell me everything, she said, pulling out a recorder. From the beginning. Marcus spent 2 hours recounting the entire story. Torres listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When he finished, she sat back with a low whistle. Reverend Michaels wasn't exaggerating. This is significant. She looked at Marcus directly. Here's what you need to understand. Legally, that collection belongs to you. The house and all its contents were sold to you free and clear through a legitimate foreclosure auction. Roland Blackwood had no will, no heirs, and the estate was properly processed through probate. What you found is yours. Marcus felt a surge of relief. So Garrett can't take it? He can try. He'll file lawsuits claiming his clients have ownership rights to specific pieces. Those claims might be legitimate,
Some of that artwork could have complicated provenance that gives other parties legal standing, but the burden of proof is on them to show which specific items belong to their clients and why. That takes time and evidence. What about the threats? Torres's expression hardened. That's where he crossed the line. Threatening you to gain access to the collection is illegal, but proving it is difficult unless you have recordings or witnesses. She paused. What Garrett's probably doing is fishing. He knows Roland had a major collection. He represents people who think they might have claims to some of it, but he doesn't know exactly what's down there or whether he can actually prove ownership. So what do? You let me and my team document everything. We'll catalog the collection, verify Roland's authentication work, and establish a clear public record of what exists and how it was acquired. Then we work with international agencies to identify any pieces that need to be returned or have legitimate competing claims. It's going to take months, maybe years, but we'll protect you and your children throughout the process. What about Garrett? Torres smiled slightly. Let me worry about Garrett. The FBI takes a dim view of attorneys who threaten witnesses in federal investigations. Once I open an official case file, he'll back off, or he'll dig himself deeper into a hole. That evening, Torres and a team of 3 other agents descended into the vault. Marcus watched as they photographed every piece, scanned every document, and carefully catalogued Roland's entire collection. The process took 8 hours. When they finally emerged, Torres looked exhausted but energized. It's all real. Every piece authenticated and documented exactly as you described. Roland Blackwood was meticulous. This is one of the most significant private collections I've ever seen. What happens now? Now we go public. Tomorrow morning I'm holding a press conference to announce the discovery and the opening of an official FBI investigation into provenance and ownership. That puts everything on the record and establishes you as a cooperating witness rather than someone hiding stolen property. Won't that bring more people after me? Yes, but it also puts them on notice that this is a federal matter and you're under protection. She softened slightly. I know this isn't what you wanted when you bought a house for $800, but you did the right thing by contacting us. A lot of people in your position would have tried to hide it or sell pieces quietly. That would have ended badly. I just want my kids to be safe. I understand, and we're going to make sure they are. But the situation deteriorated faster than anyone expected. The morning after Torres's press conference, which made national news with headlines like, Montana Father Discovers $200 Million Art Collection in Foreclosure House, the harassment began. It started with phone calls to the landline Marcus had gotten working. Reporters wanting interviews, lawyers offering services, strangers claiming to be long-lost relatives of Roland Blackwood, hoping for a piece of the fortune. Marcus stopped answering the phone. Then came the visitors. People driving up to the house at all hours, some just curious, others aggressive. A man claiming to be a descendant of a Holocaust victim demanded Marcus turn over all 17 disputed pieces immediately. 2 different law firms served him with legal notices claiming various items in the collection. Someone spray-painted "thief" across the front door in the middle of the night. Marcus installed deadbolts and kept the children inside. Emma stopped asking to go outside to play. Tyler had nightmares every night. The isolated house that had felt like sanctuary now felt like a prison. On the 5th day after Torres's announcement, Marcus woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of breaking glass. He grabbed the baseball bat he'd started keeping beside his bed and ran downstairs to find a brick lying in the middle of the living room floor surrounded by shattered window glass. A note was wrapped around the brick with rubber bands. "You don't deserve what you stole. Give it back or we'll take it." Marcus called Sheriff Tom Ridley, who arrived 20 minutes later looking grim. "This is getting out of hand," the sheriff said, examining the broken window. "I can increase patrols, but I've only got 2 deputies and a county to cover. You need better protection." Agent Torres arrived the next morning with 2 federal marshals. You and your children are being placed under protective custody until the situation stabilizes. We can move you to a safe house. No, Marcus interrupted. We've been displaced enough. This is our home. We're not leaving. Marcus, these threats are serious. Then post guards, install cameras, do whatever you need to do. But my kids have been uprooted and traumatized enough this year. They need stability, not another move to another strange place. Torres studied him, then nodded. All right, we'll secure the perimeter. But you follow our security protocols exactly. No deviation. Within 48 hours, the house was transformed into a fortress. Federal marshals rotated shifts in an SUV parked in the driveway. Security cameras covered every approach. The broken window was replaced with bulletproof glass. Emma and Tyler thought it was exciting at first, like being in a spy movie, but the novelty wore off quickly. Meanwhile, the legal battles intensified. Garrett filed motions in federal court claiming his clients had ownership rights to 23 specific pieces in the collection. The filings were aggressive and detailed, suggesting he'd gotten information from somewhere about what was in the vault. Torres suspected a leak, possibly from the county clerk's office where people had seen the original architectural plans. Then came the offer. Garrett requested a private meeting at a neutral location. Torres advised against it, but Marcus was desperate for some kind of resolution. They met in a conference room at the county courthouse, Garrett on one side with 2 associates, Marcus on the other with Torres and Reverend Michaels. Garrett opened a leather portfolio and pulled out documents. Mr. Reed, my clients are prepared to make you a very generous offer. You turn over the 23 pieces we've identified as belonging to them, plus 20% of the proceeds from any sales of other collection items, and we drop all legal claims. You'd walk away with roughly $120 million, free and clear. Marcus looked at the number written on the paper Garrett slid across the table. $120 million. More money than he'd ever imagined having. More than enough to give Emma and Tyler every advantage, every opportunity. And if I refuse? Then we litigate. For years. We'll tie up the entire collection in court. You won't be able to sell anything, use anything, access anything. Meanwhile, you'll rack up millions in legal fees. Even if you eventually win, you'll be financially destroyed by the process. Torres leaned forward. That sounds like extortion, Mr. Garrett. It's a negotiation, Agent Torres, a realistic assessment of Mr. Reed's options. Marcus looked at the offer. Then he looked at Garrett's smug face. Then he thought about Roland Blackwood spending 30 years trying to do the right thing with pieces that carried the weight of genocide and loss. Roland could have sold everything quietly and lived like a king. Instead, he'd agonized over provenance, searched for heirs, and tried to create a plan that honored the victims. Marcus pushed the paper back across the table. No deal. Garrett's smile vanished. Excuse me? I'm not selling out Roland's legacy for convenience. If your clients have legitimate claims to specific pieces, prove it in court. If you win, fine. But I'm not giving you 20% of everything just to make you go away. Roland spent 3 decades trying to do right by these pieces. I'm going to finish what he started. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Garrett stood abruptly, gathering his papers. You'll regret this. We have resources you can't imagine. We'll bury you. After Garrett left, Reverend Michaels placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. That took courage. Or stupidity, Marcus said, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. I might have just destroyed my children's future. Torres shook her head. You protected your integrity, and you're not alone in this fight. The FBI is committed to seeing this through properly. But that night, lying awake while marshals patrolled outside and his children slept fitfully down the hall, Marcus wondered if he'd made the right choice. $120 million. Gone. Because of pride or principle or stubbornness, he wasn't even sure which. The next morning, two things happened that changed everything. First, Reverend Michaels arrived with a lawyer named Patricia Chen, a cultural property attorney who specialized in art restitution cases. She was in her 60s, Chinese-American, with a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in court. Reverend Michaels explained your situation, Chen said without preamble. I'm taking your case pro bono. Lawrence Garrett has been a thorn in my side for 20 years. He represents oligarchs and criminals who use legal technicalities to claim ownership of art they have no right to. I would be delighted to destroy him in court. Second, a letter arrived via overnight courier. It was from a museum in Amsterdam. Dear Mr. Reed, we have learned of your discovery through recent news reports. Our research department has identified 3 paintings in the Blackwood collection that match works stolen from our institution during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands in 1943. We believe these pieces were sold legally after the war through a complicated chain of dealers, which is why they've been lost to us for so long. We are not interested in litigation. We simply want our paintings home. If you are willing to return them, we would like to publicly honor your integrity and possibly discuss commissioning a portrait of your family to hang alongside them, acknowledging the role you played in their restitution. We understand you have no legal obligation to return these works. We appeal to your conscience. Marcus read the letter 3 times. Then he looked at Torres. 3 paintings. How much would they be worth? She consulted her notes. Approximately $18 million. 18 million. Almost a third of the disputed pieces Garrett was demanding. Marcus looked at his children, who were coloring at the kitchen table, oblivious to the decision being made. Then he looked at Patricia Chen and said, "Draft a response. Tell them we'll return the paintings unconditionally. No compensation requested." Chen smiled. Now that's how you win a propaganda war. Garrett's claiming you're just trying to profit from war crimes. You're proving him wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus worked with Torres, Chen, and international agencies to identify which pieces had clear, documented claims from legitimate institutions or verified heirs. 7 paintings total. Combined value, approximately $41 million. He returned them all. The media coverage was overwhelming. Montana father returns stolen art worth $40 million. Single dad chooses honor over fortune. The narrative shifted from treasure hunter gets lucky to ordinary man does extraordinary thing. But Marcus didn't care about the headlines. He cared that Emma and Tyler could see him making decisions based on what was right rather than what was profitable. He cared that when they grew up, they'd be proud of how their father had handled an impossible situation. The legal battles with Garrett continued, but now public opinion had turned against the attorney. His remaining claims looked increasingly like opportunistic money grabs rather than legitimate restitution efforts. One by one, his clients dropped out as the court demanded actual proof of ownership rather than speculation. 6 months after finding the vault, on a cold spring morning with snow finally beginning to melt, Patricia Chen called with news. Garrett's withdrawn his remaining claims. He knows he can't win, and continuing would just expose his clients to scrutiny they don't want. It's over, Marcus. The collection is legally yours, minus the 7 pieces you voluntarily returned. Marcus sat down heavily. It's really over? The legal fight is over. Now comes the harder part, deciding what to do with what remains. That evening, Marcus descended into the vault one more time. He sat at Roland's desk and opened the final ledger to a blank page. In careful handwriting, he wrote, June 15th, collection transferred to Marcus Reed. 7 pieces returned to rightful institutions. Remaining items, 61 paintings, 23 drawings, 12 sculptures, 7 rare manuscripts, plus currency and financial assets. Total estimated value, approximately $197 million. Roland spent 30 years protecting these pieces and trying to do right by them. I will honor his intention. Clean pieces will be sold or kept as appropriate. Proceeds will establish the Blackwood Reed Foundation for art preservation, Holocaust education, and support for displaced families. The pieces with unclear provenance will be researched further. If heirs emerge, we'll return them. If not, they'll be loaned to museums with full historical context and acknowledgement of the loss that made their existence possible. This collection was never meant to be hidden. It was meant to mean something. Now it will. Marcus closed the ledger and looked around the vault one final time. It no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a purpose. Upstairs, Emma and Tyler were playing a board game by the fire, arguing good-naturedly about the rules. Through the window, Marcus could see the last snow melting, revealing brown grass and the promise of spring. They'd made it through the winter. They'd made it through something harder than winter, the test of who they'd become when faced with impossible choices. And somehow, impossibly, they'd come out intact. The final court judgment arrived on a Tuesday morning in late June, almost exactly 1 year after Marcus had paid $800 for a house he thought was just shelter from the storm. Patricia Chen hand-delivered the document, her usually stoic face cracked with a rare smile. "It's official," she said, settling into the kitchen chair Marcus offered. "Judge Morrison ruled in your favor on every remaining claim. The collection, minus the 7 pieces you voluntarily returned, is legally yours with clear and uncontested title. Garrett's clients have exhausted their appeals. It's over." Marcus read through the 23-page judgment, his hands steady now in a way they hadn't been months ago. The legal language was dense, but the conclusion was clear. Marcus Reed was the rightful owner of the Blackwood collection, having acquired it through legitimate purchase of the property and its contents. The court found no evidence of theft, fraud, or improper acquisition. Roland Blackwood's meticulous documentation had proven decisive. "What about the pieces with uncertain provenance?" Marcus asked. "The ones Roland couldn't trace?" Chen pulled out another file. "The court established a framework for those. They remain your property unless and until legitimate heirs come forward with documented claims. You're not required to actively search for heirs, though you can if you choose. Any decisions about returning or donating those pieces are entirely yours to make." Emma appeared in the doorway, now 9 years old and looking more like her mother every day. "Daddy, does this mean the bad people aren't coming back?" Marcus held out his arm and she came to him immediately. "Yeah, sweetheart. The bad people are gone. We're safe now." Tyler bounded in behind her, 6 years old and finally starting to laugh again. "Can we have pancakes to celebrate?" "Pancakes it is," Marcus said, lifting his son onto his lap. Over Tyler's head he met Chen's eyes. "Thank you for everything. I know you said pro bono, but Marcus, watching you handle this with integrity when you could have taken the easy money, that's payment enough. You reminded me why I got into this field in the first place." She stood to leave, then paused. "What will you do now? Sell the collection? Keep it? You've got options most people only dream about." Marcus looked at his children, then around the kitchen of the house that had saved them and tested them in equal measure. "I have some ideas. But first, I need to talk to Reverend Michaels." That evening, after the children were in bed, Marcus sat in the study with Reverend Michaels and Agent Torres, who'd stayed involved even after the investigation officially closed. She'd become something like a friend, or at least an ally who understood the weight of what Marcus had carried. "I've been thinking about Roland's original plan," Marcus began. "He wanted the collection to mean something, to honor the people who'd lost everything and to create something good from that tragedy. I want to finish what he started." "How?" Michaels asked. Marcus pulled out a notebook filled with his own careful planning. "First, the pieces with completely clean provenance, the ones with no wartime connection at all. That's about 41 pieces worth approximately $90 million. I want to sell half of those through legitimate auction houses. That gives me roughly $45 million to work with. That's still a fortune, Torres observed. It is. More than enough to secure Emma and Tyler's future. College funds, trust funds, a comfortable life. But not so much that money becomes their whole identity. He flipped to another page. The other half of the clean pieces I want to keep, not locked in a vault, but actually displayed. I'm going to convert part of this house into a small private museum, open to the public by appointment. The pieces stay in Coldwater. They get seen and appreciated, and they bring cultural value to a town that's been forgotten. Michaels nodded slowly. And the disputed pieces? The ones with unclear provenance? Those stay in trust. I'll fund ongoing research to identify any potential heirs. If we find them, the pieces go back. If after 10 years of good faith searching we find no one, then those pieces get donated to appropriate museums with full disclosure of their history. They'll be displayed with context, acknowledging the war, the loss, the displacement that brought them to market.
That's honorable, Torres said, and expensive. Provenance research isn't cheap.
Which brings me to the third part. Marcus looked at both of them. The currency, bonds, and precious metals in the vault. Roland's documentation proves those were acquired completely legitimately, no wartime connection at all. They're worth about $58 million. I want to use that to establish a foundation, the Blackwood Reed Foundation. It'll have 3 purposes: funding Holocaust education and remembrance, supporting art restitution efforts worldwide, and providing scholarships and economic development grants right here in Coldwater. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Michaels laughed, a warm, genuine sound. You're going to save this town. This town saved me, Marcus said simply. Raymond gave me credit when I had nothing. You helped me navigate impossible decisions. Sheriff Ridley kept us safe. Even the people who were suspicious at first, they came around when they saw I was trying to do right. Coldwater deserves better than being forgotten. The foundation will need oversight, Torres said. Board members, financial management, legal structure. I was hoping you'd both serve on the board, along with Patricia Chen and maybe some experts in art restitution. Marcus looked at them hopefully. I can't do this alone. I don't know how to run a foundation or manage this kind of money, but I know people who do. Michaels reached across the table and gripped Marcus's hand. I'd be honored. Same, Torres added. Though I have to say, Marcus, you've come a long way from the desperate father who could barely scrape together $800. I'm still that father, Marcus said quietly. I'm just a desperate father who got lucky and is trying not to screw it up. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus worked with Sotheby's to auction 20 pieces from the clean collection. The sale made international news. Blackwood Collection sale raises $92 million. Bidders came from around the world, attracted by both the quality of the art and the remarkable story behind it. Marcus kept his promise to himself. After taxes and fees, he put $15 million in trust funds for Emma and Tyler, enough to ensure their education and security, but structured so they couldn't access the bulk of it until they were 30. Another $5 million went into a personal account for immediate needs and home improvements. The remaining $72 million became the seed money for the Blackwood Reed Foundation. The foundation's first act was to fund extensive provenance research on the 17 disputed pieces. Marcus hired a team of historians, genealogists, and art experts to trace ownership histories back as far as possible. It was painstaking, expensive work, but within the first year they'd identified legitimate heirs for 4 more paintings. Marcus returned all 4, asking for nothing in return. One went to an elderly woman in Israel whose grandmother had owned it before the war. She'd lost her entire family in the camps. When Marcus called to tell her the painting was coming home, she wept. "I never thought I'd see anything from our house again," she said through tears. "My grandmother loved that painting. She'd tell me stories about the artist. I thought it was lost forever." "It's not lost anymore," Marcus told her. "And neither is your grandmother's story. We're documenting everything. Who owned these pieces, what happened to them, how they were scattered. Your family's history will be preserved." The publicity from these returns transformed the narrative completely. Marcus Reed wasn't a treasure hunter or a lucky opportunist anymore. He was the man who'd found a fortune and used it to heal old wounds, but the real transformation was happening in Coldwater itself. The foundation's first local grant was $50,000 to renovate Raymond's general store. Raymond had never asked for anything, but Marcus insisted. The store got new shelves, updated equipment, and a small cafe section that quickly became the town's informal gathering place. Then came scholarships, full-ride college funding for any Coldwater student who qualified. The first recipient was a girl named Ashley Henderson, who'd been planning to skip college because her family couldn't afford it. With foundation support, she enrolled at Montana State to study engineering. "You changed my life," she told Marcus at the scholarship ceremony the foundation held at the community center. "You changed your own life by working hard," Marcus replied. "The foundation just removed one obstacle." But Marcus knew it was more than removing obstacles. It was restoring hope to a town that had forgotten how to dream. More grants followed: money to reopen the closed medical clinic, funding for a volunteer fire department, support for small businesses trying to stay afloat. Coldwater wasn't dying anymore. It was breathing again. The house itself underwent significant changes. Marcus hired contractors to carefully renovate the structure while preserving its character. The vault became a proper climate-controlled gallery space, professionally lit and curated. The remaining 21 paintings from the clean collection were displayed there, along with detailed placards explaining their history and Roland Blackwood's story. Marcus opened the Blackwood House Museum on a crisp October morning, 1 year and 4 months after buying the property. Over 200 people attended: locals, art enthusiasts from across Montana, journalists, and representatives from museums around the world. Reverend Michaels gave a blessing. Sheriff Ridley cut the ribbon. Emma and Tyler stood beside their father, beaming with pride. "This house saved our family when we had nowhere else to go," Marcus told the crowd. "Roland Blackwood built it as a sanctuary for his collection. Now it's a sanctuary for anyone who wants to experience beauty and history. It belongs to all of us." The museum operated on a donation basis, suggested contribution $10, but no one turned away. Within 6 months, it was attracting hundreds of visitors monthly. People came from across the country to see the collection and hear the story of the desperate father who'd found a fortune and chosen integrity over ease. But Marcus's favorite visitors were the local ones, the elderly couple who came every Sunday afternoon to sit quietly in front of their favorite painting, the high school students who sketched the artworks for class assignments, the children Tyler's age who ran through the halls with wonder, pointing at colors and asking endless questions. One afternoon, Marcus found Raymond sitting alone in the gallery, staring at a Dutch landscape painting. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marcus said, settling into the chair beside him. "It is." Raymond was quiet for a moment. "You know, when you first came to my store, desperate and broke with 2 kids to feed, I almost didn't help you. Thought you might be trouble. Thought this town had enough problems without taking on someone else's." "Why did you help then?" "Because somebody helped me once when I needed it. Figured I should pass it on." He turned to Marcus. "I'm glad I did. You've brought this town back to life." Marcus shook his head. "The town was always alive. It just needed a reason to believe again." At home, the changes were just as profound. Emma thrived. She joined the school art club, discovered a love of painting, and talked constantly about maybe becoming a museum curator someday. She'd started writing stories about her mother, keeping Sarah's memory alive through words and pictures. Tyler was different, louder, sillier, more confident. He'd made friends at school, joined the youth soccer league the foundation had helped fund, and recently announced he wanted to be an astronaut, archaeologist, zookeeper when he grew up. The nightmares had stopped. The constant questions about when Mommy was coming home had faded into acceptance. One evening, Marcus found Tyler in the museum gallery, sitting cross-legged in front of a painting of a mother and child.
"Hey, buddy, what are you doing?"
"Looking at this," Tyler said simply. "She looks like Mommy did, when she smiled." Marcus's throat tightened. He sat down beside his son. "Yeah, she does a little."
"Do you think Mommy knows about all this? About the house and the paintings and the foundation?"
"I think she knows, and I think she's proud of us." "I'm proud of us, too," Tyler said with the straightforward honesty of a 6-year-old. Then he hopped up and ran off to play, leaving Marcus alone with the painting of the mother and child. Sarah would have loved this, Marcus thought. She'd have been horrified by the stress and danger, but she'd have loved what came after. The chance to do something meaningful, to give their children a future built on integrity rather than just survival. "I hope I'm making you proud," he whispered to the empty gallery. "I hope we're doing this right." The second year brought new developments. The foundation expanded its reach, partnering with international organizations to support art restitution efforts in Poland, Germany, and Austria. Marcus traveled to Berlin for a conference on cultural property recovery, bringing Emma and Tyler with him. He wanted them to see the larger world, to understand that their comfortable life came with responsibility. In Berlin, they visited museums where pieces from the Blackwood collection had been returned. Emma stood in front of her grandmother's painting, the one Marcus had given back to the elderly woman in Israel, and read the placard that told the family's story.
"That lady's grandmother died in the war," Emma said quietly. "And she never thought she'd see this painting again, but we gave it back to her."
"We did," Marcus confirmed. "That's better than keeping it, right? Even though it was worth a lot of money?" "Much better. Money comes and goes, Emma, but doing the right thing, that stays with you forever." Back in Coldwater, the town continued its transformation. New businesses opened. Young families moved in, attracted by the foundation scholarships and the renewed sense of community. The population grew for the first time in 20 years. Coldwater was no longer the place people left from. It was becoming a place people moved to. The foundation launched a vocational training program, teaching trades like carpentry, welding, and electrical work. Marcus supervised some of the classes, finding joy in teaching skills he'd learned years ago in construction. Some of his students were teenagers figuring out their futures. Others were adults who'd been unemployed for years, rediscovering their purpose. One student was a man named James, who'd lost his job when the mill closed and had been drinking himself to death slowly ever since. The foundation paid for his addiction treatment and then hired him to help with maintenance at the museum. 6 months later, James was sober, employed, and helping lead the vocational welding classes. "You saved my life," he told Marcus after one class. "No," Marcus replied. "You saved your life. You did the work, but I'm proud of you." That was the thing Marcus had learned. Money could remove obstacles and create opportunities, but it couldn't change people. People changed themselves. The foundation just made it easier. By the third year, the Blackwood House Museum had become a regional attraction. Art students from universities across Montana came to study the collection. Scholars requested access to Roland's archives to research provenance methodologies. The museum partnered with schools to offer free field trips, exposing children to art they'd never otherwise see. Marcus hired staff, a curator, 2 educators, and an administrative assistant. He stepped back from daily operations, content to serve on the board and focus on the foundation's work. He'd never wanted to be a museum director or a public figure. He'd just wanted to do right by Roland's legacy and provide for his children. But people kept trying to make him into something larger than he was. Documentary filmmakers wanted to tell his story. Publishers offered book deals. Universities invited him to speak. He turned down most of it, accepting only when he thought it might help the Foundation's mission or inspire others to do similar work. The one exception was a speaking engagement at Emma's school. She'd asked him to talk to her class about courage and making hard choices. How could he say no to that? He sat in a too-small chair in front of 29-year-olds and told them the truth. 3 years ago, I was homeless. My wife had just died. I had 2 kids, no job, and $800 to my name. I bought a house because I was desperate, and I found something that changed everything. But the important part isn't that I found a fortune. The important part is what I did after I found it. A girl raised her hand. Why didn't you just keep all the money? You needed it, right? I did need it. We were eating rice and canned beans for dinner, but some of that art belonged to people who'd lost everything in a terrible war. If I'd kept pieces that should have gone back to their families, I'd have been profiting from other people's suffering. That felt wrong. But you kept some of it, a boy pointed out. I did. The pieces that were mine legally and ethically, where there was no question about ownership and no one with a better claim. I kept enough of those to take care of my family and fund work that honors the people who lost so much. That felt right. Emma, sitting in the front row, raised her hand even though she already knew the answer. What if you'd chosen wrong? What if you'd kept everything and gotten rich? Marcus looked at his daughter, so serious and thoughtful. Then I'd have money but no peace. And you and Tyler would have grown up thinking that's okay. That you can profit from other people's pain as long as it's legal. I didn't want to teach you that. What did you want to teach us? Tyler piped up from beside his sister. That being rich doesn't matter as much as being good. That doing the right thing is more valuable than doing the easy thing. And that when life gives you more than you need, the best thing to do is share it. The class was quiet for a moment. Then the teacher started clapping and the children joined in. Marcus felt his face flush with embarrassment, but when he saw the pride shining in Emma's eyes, he knew he'd said what needed to be said. On the 4th anniversary of buying the house, Marcus stood in the same spot where he'd first seen it rising from the snow like a Gothic fortress. So much had changed. The driveway was paved now. The exterior had been gently restored, the stone cleaned and repointed. Security lights illuminated the property, but they were subtle, designed to highlight beauty rather than broadcast fear. Inside, the house was warm and lived in. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator. Tyler's soccer cleats dried by the door. The rooms that had once been shrouded in dusty sheets now echoed with laughter and arguments and the ordinary chaos of family life. But it was still Roland's house, too. His spirit lingered in the careful construction, the hidden vault that had become a gallery, the meticulous records that had made everything possible. Marcus felt like a caretaker of something larger than himself, a story that had started long before he arrived and would continue long after he left. Agent Torres visited that evening, bringing a bottle of wine and news. The final provenance report came in. Of the 17 disputed pieces, we found legitimate heirs for 11 of them. The remaining 6 have been researched as thoroughly as possible. No heirs exist. Those pieces are yours to do with as you wish, clear and free. Marcus had already decided. They go to museums. 1 to the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. 2 to European institutions that lost pieces during the war. The rest to regional museums that don't usually get access to works of this quality, all with full historical context and acknowledgement. Torres smiled. You're giving away approximately $47 million. I'm giving away paintings that carry too much history to be owned by one person. They need to be seen, studied, remembered. That's more important than money. Roland would be proud. I hope so. Marcus poured wine into the glasses Torres had brought. I've been thinking about him a lot lately, wondering what he'd think of all this, the museum, the foundation, the town coming back to life. Do you think this is what he wanted? I think it's better than what he wanted. He wanted to do good with the collection, but he was planning to do it quietly, anonymously. You've done it publicly, transparently, in a way that inspires other people. That's a bigger legacy. They sat on the porch as the sun set, watching Emma and Tyler play soccer in the yard with neighborhood children who came over almost daily now. The marshals were long gone. The security was minimal. Life had returned to something approaching normal, except normal now included a museum in their basement and a foundation that was changing lives. "Do you ever regret it?" Torres asked, "choosing the hard path?" Marcus thought about it honestly. "Sometimes I wonder what life would have been like if I'd taken Garrett's deal. $120 million, no complications, no stress. We'd be richer. Maybe living somewhere warm, somewhere easy." He watched Tyler score a goal and Emma cheer for him. "But then I think about what Emma said in class, that being rich doesn't matter as much as being good. She believes that because she watched me choose it. That's worth more than any amount of money." You've built something remarkable here, Marcus. Not just the foundation or the museum, but a model for how to handle impossible situations with integrity. People are watching. People are learning. Good. Maybe the next person who finds themselves holding someone else's tragedy will remember this story and make better choices than they might have otherwise. The 5-year mark brought a celebration that filled the Coldwater Community Center to capacity. The foundation had awarded over 300 scholarships, funded 50 small business grants, and supported art restitution projects in 12 countries. The museum had welcomed over 30,000 visitors. Coldwater's population had grown by 30%, reversing decades of decline. Mayor Anderson, newly elected after the previous mayor retired, stood at the podium. 5 years ago, Marcus Reed came to our town with nothing. He bought a house nobody wanted in a town most people had forgotten. What he found there could have been his ticket out. Instead, he chose to stay. He chose us. And in doing so, he reminded us that places like Coldwater matter, that ordinary people doing extraordinary things can change the world. The applause was thunderous. Marcus stood reluctantly, uncomfortable with recognition but grateful for the community's support. He kept his remarks brief. "I didn't change this town. This town changed me. You welcomed a stranger who had nothing. You extended kindness when I needed it most. Everything good that's happened since, the foundation, the museum, the scholarships, that's just me paying forward what you gave me first. Thank you for being home." Later, as the crowd dispersed and Marcus helped fold chairs, Raymond approached. The old man was slower now, but his eyes still sharp. "You know what I think about when I look at you?" Raymond asked. "What?" "I think about that first day you came to my store, desperate and broke. I almost turned you away. Almost said the town couldn't afford to take on anyone else's problems. But then I remembered being that desperate person once, and someone had helped me. So I helped you." He gripped Marcus's shoulder. "Now look what came from that one small choice. All of this, the scholarships, the businesses, the hope, it started because I gave a stranger some credit on groceries. Makes you wonder what the world would look like if more people made those small choices." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "You saved us, Raymond." "No, son, you saved yourself. I just gave you space to do it." That night, after the celebration ended and the house was quiet, Marcus descended to the gallery one last time. The remaining paintings glowed softly under professional lighting. Each one had a story, an artist who'd created it, owners who'd loved it, a journey through time that had eventually led here, to a small town in Montana, to a museum built from tragedy and redemption. Marcus sat at Roland's old desk, now preserved as part of the museum's permanent exhibit. He opened the ledger to the pages where he'd been documenting the foundation's work, a continuation of Roland's meticulous record-keeping. The entries told a story of money given away, lives changed, artwork returned to its rightful place. On a fresh page he wrote, 5 years since discovery, total pieces returned, 18, Total value of returns, approximately $89 million. Foundation endowment, $68 million, generating $3.4 million annually for scholarships and grants. Museum visitors, 32,000. Lives demonstrably changed. Impossible to count, but at least 300 through direct foundation support. Many more through ripple effects. Roland, I hope this is what you wanted. I hope wherever you are, you know your collection is doing the work you always intended. Thank you for leaving it behind. Thank you for choosing carefully when you acquired these pieces. Thank you for documenting everything so meticulously. Without your groundwork, none of this would have been possible. You saved my family. Your house gave us shelter when we had none. Your collection gave us security. But more than that, you gave us purpose. You gave me a chance to teach my children that integrity matters more than wealth, that history deserves respect, that doing the right thing is always worth the cost. I promise to continue honoring your legacy. The foundation will outlive me. The museum will outlive me. The work of restitution and education will continue long after everyone who knew your name has passed. That's immortality of the best kind. Not being remembered yourself, but having your values and your work live on forever. Rest well, Roland Blackwood. Your burden is lighter now, and the world is better because you carried it. Marcus closed the ledger and turned off the gallery lights, leaving only the soft security illumination that made the paintings glow like dreams in the darkness. Upstairs, he checked on his children one final time. Emma asleep with a sketchbook still in her hands. Tyler sprawled across his bed with one arm draped over the stuffed bear that had survived every hardship. They were safe. They were happy. They were growing up in a home built on integrity and in a community that valued both struggle and triumph. The fortune hidden beneath their feet had become something better than wealth. It had become purpose, legacy, and hope. Anyone can find treasure if they're willing to take the risk. But it takes real courage to decide what to do with it once it's found. To choose honor over ease, responsibility over profit, legacy over luxury. Marcus Reed had found both the treasure and the courage, and in doing so he'd discovered something more valuable than any painting, any fortune, any security. He'd found the answer to the question that haunted him on that first desperate night in the snow-buried house. He'd found out what kind of man he wanted to be, what kind of father he wanted to be, what kind of legacy he wanted to leave, and the answer shone brighter than all the gold in Roland's vault. The next morning dawned clear and cold, winter giving way to early spring. Marcus made pancakes, Tyler's favorite, and watched his children eat breakfast in the warm kitchen of the house that had saved them and tested them and ultimately transformed them. "Daddy," Emma said through a mouthful of syrup-soaked pancake, "Ashley's speaking at school next week. She's the scholarship girl who went to college, remember? She wants to tell kids they can do anything if someone believes in them." "Are you going to listen?" "Yeah, and I'm going to tell her thank you. Because she's right about people believing in you. You believed in me and Tyler even when everything was terrible. That mattered." Marcus blinked back unexpected tears. "You're pretty smart for a 10-year-old. "She's almost 11, Tyler corrected importantly. "Her birthday's next month. Are we doing a big party?" "The biggest," Marcus promised, and realized with a jolt of gratitude that he could promise that now without worry. Not because they were rich, though they were comfortable, but because they were secure. Because they'd built a life that was stable and good and filled with people who cared about them. Later, standing at the window watching Emma teach Tyler how to paint watercolors on the porch, Marcus thought about the long, strange journey from that desperate morning in a car outside an apartment they couldn't afford to this moment of ordinary, extraordinary happiness. He'd bought a house for $800. He'd found a fortune. He'd faced threats and danger and impossible choices. He'd given away tens of millions of dollars that he legally could have kept. He'd built a foundation and a museum and a legacy that would outlive him. But the thing he was most proud of, the thing that mattered most, was watching his children laugh and paint and grow up believing that integrity was more valuable than wealth,
that generosity was strength rather than weakness, and that one person choosing to do right could change the world. Some houses are just buildings, but some houses change everything. And sometimes the people who need saving most are the ones chosen to do the saving. The stone house on the edge of Coldwater was no longer the reclusive Roland Blackwood's secret fortress. It was Marcus Reed's home. It was the Blackwood House Museum. It was the headquarters of a foundation changing lives across the world. It was a symbol of second chances and hard choices, and the quiet heroism of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It was proof that sometimes, when you've lost everything, when you're standing at the edge with nothing but courage and $800, the universe gives you exactly what you need, not to get rich, but to become who you were always meant to be. And that, Marcus thought as he stepped outside to join his children in the spring sunshine, was the greatest treasure of all. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories of hope, transformation, and the courage to do what's right even when it costs everything. Click to keep the journey going. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that integrity is worth more than any fortune, that second chances can lead to extraordinary legacies, and that sometimes the best inheritance we can leave our children isn't money. It's the example of how to live with honor.